Hey everyone, welcome to Singularity Computers Client Build 4 Part 3. This part of the build log is going to follow directly on from Part 2, so here we go. Okay, I'm just installing the radiator into the bottom compartment of the case now. So the radiator is all ready to go, the grills are on, the fans are on, and so are the dust filters. So this is really the last time you'll be able to properly see the radiator. What I've done is stuck on some of the phobia stripping here, which is actually usually used for, you know, sealing around the edges of fans, things like that. But I think that this will help the radiator slide into the case better and prevent damage to the bottom of the case, you know, because otherwise it will be metal to metal on the bottom of the case. Like the radiator itself will be sitting straight on the metal of the bottom panel of the case, and I don't want metal to metal at all. Even though I'm going to be bolting it all in there nicely, it's not going to be moving anywhere. I still don't want metal to metal, so that's what that's for. Hopefully this slides in easily. I'm going to slide it in right now and see how it goes. I need to push it in from the back. Okay, I have the radiator mounted and bolted into position. And the way I've mounted it, it is not going anywhere. I am confident that even during shipping, when this thing is being rolled and rattled around, the radiator is absolutely, definitely going to stay in position. So, you can see the phobia strips all the way across the bottom there. I've mounted the radiator, you know, down onto the bottom of the case, onto those phobia strips, so that there's absolutely no metal to metal contact. There's a slight gap at the top of the radiator, so it's not sitting against the top panel, it's actually being held away from it. And I had a number of different radiator mounts available to me. I got a couple of different ones in stock for this build in particular. I already had some in stock because I knew that I couldn't plan what mount I was going to use. I didn't know until the radiator was in position. You know, the grills and the fans were on and everything was in position, ready to go. I didn't know until then what mount was going to suit, because I wanted to use the existing holes in the case. I didn't want to go butchering and drilling the case. You know, this being a client build, I wanted to keep the warranty of the case if I could. So I managed to use the existing holes. What I ended up using is an XSPC 140mm radiator mount. You can see I've bolted through it just there. And what I've done, I've gone through the grill, through a washer, through the radiator mount and into the radiator. The same thing, I've done the same thing at the top there, and then it's pretty dark up there, but you can see the radiator mount actually folds over and goes, it's actually resting up there onto the top panel. It's making direct contact with the top panel of the bottom compartment, and it's bolted onto that panel. And then it worked out really well because there's only one bolt holding it to that top panel, but to prevent twist, it's actually sitting up against one of the case panels here all the way across. So that stops twist. I mean, it's bolted onto the radiator, so that stops twist. It is extremely stable. I mean, you could drop this thing and that is not going to be the thing that breaks off, trust me. So that is the same radiator mount just there. This is actually the 120mm version though. But that's the position that I've put it in, okay? Just like that. That's exactly how it's sitting inside of the case. And it's resting up against that top panel. Okay, I've got the back undone at the moment because I'm just about to put the power supply in there, but I wanted to show you what I've done at the back first, because I have a mount at the front and a mount at the back. So I'm going to take you around the other side now and show you from the other side. Okay, you can see it's all in position from this side. The dust filters and fans are on. I have a decent gap along this side, and you know, I needed to do that anyway because the hooks from the side panel goes in there. I didn't need a gap this big, but this is just the way it worked out. If I have a gap that big, it mounts in there perfectly, and of course there's no harm in having a gap that big There's still plenty of room, everything still fits, it just worked out perfectly. So you can see there's still a decent gap at the front there, and I'm now going to show you where I've mounted. You can see just there, I know it's very dark, but you can see a washer and a nut. And that is the other side of the bolt coming down through from the top. And that is what holds the XSPC 140mm radiator mount to that top panel. Okay? So if you haven't already understood, I've bolted it to this panel through a hole that looks exactly like that just there, because there's actually 4 of these holes. There's one on either side here, and there's one on either side up here. So I've mounted it to the one up here. Now I wish I could have showed you all of it, but it was impossible because all of it's out of sight. I had to stick my fingers in, you know, it was very hard to do all of that up. Now that I've got it all done up tight, yeah, I'm certainly not going to go undoing it again. It was an absolute nightmare. So what I've done at the back here, so this is the back panel. I just have one of those EK uni holders, and I've just bolted it onto the ventilated panel just there. A couple of washers on that side, a couple more on the other side. So they're M4s. I had to use M3s at the front. Well, actually a single M3 at the front, but yeah, it's all, you know, black bolts with spring washers. It's all high quality components, there's no doubt about that. Okay, so this is what I've done at the back. Very simple. I've already lined it all up properly and it's all ready to go. So I'm just going to put this panel in now to show you how it works. Okay, I have that power supply bracket mounted now, and I'll just give you a look from the back here. You can see the radiator through there. You can see the EK uni holder just there. I could have used black washers on that, but I didn't have anything that big in black. But it looks completely fine anyway. So now I've got the power supply in there ready to go. I'm just about to mount that, but I've just pushed it forward so that you can see how I have the uni holder mounted to the radiator. So all I've done, all of the threads on the radiator are M4, so that's just an M4 screw just there. I've got that going through the grill, and then I have the washer, and then I have the uni holder. So that is a very secure way of holding it to the back of the case. And I mean, you could get a bit of twist happening, like with some serious upwards pressure towards the top panel. You know, it looks like it might twist, because you've only got this one holding in here. It would be nice to have another one like further up, but I mean, to twist that, you would have to bend the uni holder, because you've got that mounted flat to that back panel there. Okay, and that uni holder is very thick, so I don't think that is going to go anywhere. And I mean, even if it does, the distance between like the gap at the top there is about 2 millimeters. So the farthest it's going to go, even if it does bend the uni holder, it's just going to tap the top panel. And it's only going to do that if it's like dropped upside down. So I think that'd be, you know, if it was dropped upside down, I think that'd be one of the last things to get damaged anyway. So that's about it. I've started doing some cable management there, obviously. So 2 Molex powers all 4 radiator fans and the 2 180mm. I've got the power for the pump here, which I still have to clean up the cable management for. Have to get some fittings on there so that I can start hosing up, because yeah, that connector, you know, it'll come from the pump there, go down to the radiator and then come back up. And I'll probably get it up through this gap here between the power supply and the... oh, actually the power supply won't even be there. Okay, I have the power supply in now, and I thought I'd just give you another look. So that looks great from the back there. I'm really happy with how that looks with that chunky ventilation panel. Just look from this side. Okay, so originally I had the power supply fan facing this way. And I had one of the Silverstone 140mm dust filters on it because I really wanted this build to be easy to maintain for the client. You know, easy to dust clean, and having the fan facing this way, of course it's just a matter of vacuuming the filter. But the problem was, have a look at the gap between the power supply and the radiator. It is very small. It's about 10, actually maybe 20mm, including the gap underneath the grill. So the radiator, that first fan on the radiator would have just been blowing up against this panel on the power supply, and the air would have been going nowhere. So I decided that it was better for the water cooling system, for the radiator ventilation, if I mounted the power supply this way, because then the power supply is getting, it'll be getting lukewarm air from the radiator, but seriously, how hot is the air going to be? It's not going to be enough to affect the power supply, in my opinion, to negatively affect the power supply. I think that the extra air that it will be getting, thanks to the big noise blocker 140mm PK3, that'll be blowing a lot of air through that radiator. Yeah, I think that extra air will actually be beneficial to the power supply. Because, yeah, just consider that 140mm fan is blowing straight into the power supply fan, okay? And then all that air is just coming straight out the back here. I think it's perfect. Okay, I've got the motherboard in, and I'm just about to install the graphics cards. Okay, the graphics cards are in, as well as the BitsPower Crystal Link. And I've also started doing the wiring. Most of the wiring now is actually done. I'm really happy with the way this is starting to look. It's exactly how I planned it. I'm really happy with the position of the reservoir. I think it balances out the build nicely. The other spot I was going to put it was up the back here, but I think that it's going to be busy enough on this side once the tubing is done. I think it's going to be balanced perfectly. There's going to be no blank spots in the build, and that the gap just there is going to be covered up by the reservoir. Also, some of the wiring that you can see there for the front panel cables is going to be, it's hidden behind the pump and the reservoir, so it works out perfectly. So yeah, you can see that the graphics cards, all the power is connected to the graphics cards, the 24-pin motherboard power, the 8-pin EPS, all of the front panel cables. And I think I was definitely right about the memory. I'm really happy with this choice of memory for aesthetic reasons. It looks amazing. Having the extra black on the motherboard worked out really well, because once the coolant is in the loop, there is going to be a lot more red. Like the graphics card water blocks are going to show up red, the reservoir, the tubing obviously, because I'm using clear tubing in this build. I'm going to continue on. Next time you see the build, I think I might actually go right through now until completion. Okay, I've gone ahead and almost completely finished the build. I've tubed up. The loop is actually ready to be filled now, and that is the next step. The next thing I'm going to be doing is filling the loop, and I'm going to be showing you some of that process as well. So I'm really happy with the way it's turned out. I'm absolutely stoked with this build. I love the case. There's some incredible hardware in this system. The loop looks amazing. It's going to look even more amazing, of course, once it's been filled and once all the lighting is on, the system is running. This is an incredible build. I'm actually so happy with this build that I'm almost considering giving the client their money back and keeping it for myself. No, not really, but anyway, you get the picture. Okay, I'll just show you the tubing routing now and the fittings that I've used. So starting at the reservoir, down into the pump, I've used a D plug there. Coming out of the pump, I have a 90-degree single rotary and a compression fitting. So these fittings are all BitsPower Black Sparkle. I'm using Tygon 1/2" tubing. So that goes down there and through a coolant's VL4N quick disconnect, another compression fitting, and a 90-degree dual rotary fitting, and then into the radiator. And then back out of the radiator, another 90-degree dual rotary, a compression fitting, and then into another coolant's VL4N quick disconnect. Now you can see I've used a tie here. I wouldn't normally do that, but this system is going to be shipped into state. I'm tying everything down and bolting everything down, making this system as tough as I can to, you know, handle shipping, and also just so that it'll last a long time. Maybe it'll go to land, who knows. So I'm just tying everything down, making everything as hardy and as tough as I can. So the reason I've put the two quick disconnects here is because you want to be able to drain the loop when the system is upright. Obviously you don't want to have to roll it around. So to be able to do that, you need to be able to drain both sides. So this quick disconnect will drain, you know, this side of the build, and then the other one will drain the reservoir. So that'll pretty much get the whole thing empty except for the GPU, you know, the graphics card water blocks. And to make draining easier, I've also added extra tubing length here. You know, there's a fair bit of extra length there, so that you can, you know, disconnect it, bring the tube out the side of the case and empty the loop. Also a bit of extra length on this side. I mean, I could have tightened that up against there just to allow for draining. The other reason that I made this one so long, I mean, I could have shortened it and tied it up to the top there. I wanted it sitting down here on the floor, somewhere where it's going to stay. You know, the cable management has been, I've done it in such a way that it's around the tubing, it's holding it in place, so it's not going to flop around and, you know, end up somewhere you don't want it during shipping. So yeah, there's no way any of this is going anywhere. I've tied all of this, you know, these cables down, I've tied them to the radiator. That tubing is going to stay there. You know, the other option is to make it a bit shorter, tight to the top, but then the ties, basically you've got to use Velcro or stick something onto the top panel here, and it's just going to fall off, mainly because this system is going to a hot part of Australia. I live in a hot part of Australia, so there we go. That's why that tube is so long. So it comes up here into the CPU water block. I just have straight compression fittings on the CPU water block. I haven't gone and put any other fittings there because it really wasn't necessary. Out of the CPU into the first graphics card, here I have a compression fitting and also an extension fitting, because the compression fitting was doing up against the graphics card PCB. So I just needed to extend it up there to get that out of the way. Then into the bits power crystal link configuration. Straight compression fitting there, and then that loops up and into the top of the reservoir, and there I have a compression fitting and a 90-degree elbow single rotary. So that's the tubing routing and fittings. Okay, that sums up this part of the build log. That is all I can show you until part 4. Now, some of you might have noticed that I skipped a little bit of the build process towards the end of this part of the build log. For example, when I installed the motherboard, I didn't talk about how I'd installed the memory and the CPU water block. I also haven't talked about the cable management yet. I've decided to cover all that once the build is finished, because I'd rather give you a much better look around the finished product instead of, you know, giving you a look around something that's half finished. So yeah, in the next part of the build log you'll be seeing the finished product. I'll give you a good look around, talk about anything that I haven't already covered. I just wanted to say that I really appreciated all of your supportive comments on my last video. You guys know who you are. I'm grateful for that. I'm definitely going to continue, you know, doing things the way I have been, providing as much detail as I can, and, you know, continuing to have as long videos as possible. And, you know, I'm going to develop that and improve on that. Anyway, the next part of the build log will again follow directly on. You can see I've actually moved the system now from where I built it, and I've moved it to my test peripherals. This is where all of the testing and validation will take place, the leak testing, and then all of the stability, performance and temperature testing. So I'll talk about all the tests that I put my water-cooled systems through in the next part of the build log. And the next part of the build log will actually start by me filling up the loop, and I'm going to show you almost all of that process. Anyway, I better leave it there. That sums up this video. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe, like and favorite if you want to see more.